This podcast was recorded before recent federal policy changes impacted many of the programs discussed and may not reflect the most current information.
Welcome to How to Not Kill Your Community, a podcast from the Delaware Community Foundation. In each episode, we interview experts to explore the choices we make as Delawareans, how we spend our taxes, steward our land, build housing, and how those choices impact the places we call home. What happens if we neglect our libraries, turn away newcomers, let philanthropy fade? Most importantly, how do we not kill our communities? I'm Stuart Comstock-Gay, President and CEO of the DCF. Thank you for listening. Welcome to How to Not Kill Your Community, our podcast this season. And I'm sitting here with State Senator Russ Huxtable. Thrilled to be here in our Lewes office, which is a relatively new addition to the DCF infrastructure. And we're thrilled to be here in this beautiful space. And I'm going to say a bit about you, Senator Huxtable, Russ, and then we're going to get to it and to talk a little bit about how to not kill our communities. So Senator Huxtable, who grew up in the Wilmington area, has been serving Delaware's 6th district, including Milton, Lewes, Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach, since your election in 2022. And you're in your second, you've been elected twice now, I do believe. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Over 2 decades of experience in affordable housing and community development, which is why you're the perfect person to be here today, including serving as Vice President of the Milford Housing Development Corporation, a great organization in the state. Commitment to community service began in high school, continued through college, where you volunteered with the Appalachia Service Project, home repair ministry, serving Central Appalachia, and beyond all of this, remain active in your community, coaching youth soccer, and participating in local historical activities. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to do it. So our frame for this podcast is this book here by Doug Griffiths called 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. And we thought that's a really interesting way to think about things that matter in our community. And we thought, perfect. Housing. We could kill our community. So why isn't it a good idea to take, or why is it a good idea to take the public out of housing? Why would that be a great thing for our community?
Yes, housing is a critical and foundational issues for every family, every person. And we need to have the public involved in housing to get the results that we need for community health, for stability, for economic prosperity. And you just can't do that alone without the public's involvement through federal, state, local resources.
And so is that just about money, or is it about policies and zoning and whatnot?
It's about both.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other. We're going through an affordable housing task force right now at the state to address this issue and see what sort of policies we can promote. And you have the state could provide additional resources, which I think is necessary and needed. But do we subsidize poor zoning? And we don't want to do both. We want to have, we want to do both. We want to have good zoning. We also want to have good financial incentives and investment.
Say a word about, there seem to be a couple big issues in housing right now in the state, or at least a couple big issues. But one is that the overall price of housing has gone up a whole lot, as we know, dramatically in the last decade. And there are probably a lot of reasons we could talk about it. And if you want to talk about that, I'd like to hear it. But there's also a question of the location of housing and where accessible, affordable housing is. For instance, we're sitting here in Lewes, and the challenge for people in the service sector is huge. Can you talk about the scale of our housing challenge?
In the state of Delaware?
In the state of Delaware, and you can do down here too.
Yeah, it's obviously a critical element. We have folks who talk about traffic woes and issues here, and if we had more affordable housing options within our own communities, perhaps there's less traffic. Public investments in public transportation would be more well utilized and well used. So it's a growing issue. It's something I've worked my professional life in, knowing that we had this issue, advocating for better policies. It's one of the reasons why I did run in 2022 is
Say more about that. Yeah.
State of Delaware had been investing about $4 million in affordable housing from 1987 until 2022. And as a nonprofit leader, I would advocate the state and federal levels for better housing investment. And we didn't really get to where we needed to get to. And so I thought it was, instead of being that advocate, talking to the legislators across the table, perhaps I could make a better difference on the other side of that table. So we ran and we increased our investments in affordable housing from $4 million to $31.5 million from the general fund. We passed numerous bills last year to help reduce the cost of housing, provide better incentives. So we're starting to tackle the issues that we needed to tackle, and we're not done yet.
Yeah. Well, Sam, what's next?
So we have this task force. We still want to address zoning. We want to address the proper investments. And one of the reasons why this is so important, we just came out of the holiday season, and I've always told people, one of my favorite movies, It's a Wonderful Life. And you have George Bailey talking about these are the people who live here, shop here, work here. This is why we do it. This is community. Everybody is part of this community. And to have a growing, robust community, we just can't have affordable housing over here and everything else over here. We need to be integrated and behave like a community.
So we're in a very funny time nationally right now. Or as our friend Bob Putnam says, we're in a pickle.
Yeah.
And that at the federal level, it's really unclear what's going to be happening for things like housing. And when we think about our work at the Community Foundation, we think a lot about how do we zero in on community. Yeah. Try not to get too distracted by the noise, and it's more than noise, I understand that. We all have to deal with it, but how do we double down on our communities, on people coming together to solve these problems, and people committing jointly? We need housing for everybody. We need to be living together and working together and playing together. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, we're starting to have more robust conversations. These were conversations that people find, housing is kind of difficult to discuss. And so we would address symptoms of the housing issue rather than, I think, the core issue, which is housing. The state would spend $18+ million, I think, on transporting kids from one school district to another if they're experiencing homelessness. And that was good policy, because you want to make sure that they're in that same environment and that kid is getting that stable education with their friends and the teachers that they're familiar with instead of moved around. But we're still only investing $4 million in what the core issue was, which was housing.
When we think about housing, it's not just one entity that can do the work. What's the role of public-private partnerships in addressing housing challenges? And do you know successful models here that you want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the only way that it can get done, through public-private partnerships. The state does not build housing itself, so we need to set the conditions for the private market to do so. So if we can come in with financing, and we work with private developers, the nonprofit community, working with all those pieces puts together the whole entire puzzle. And there are great examples that happen all the time. Delaware State Housing Authority, which is our housing finance agency, operates the low-income housing tax credit program, which is probably the epitome of a public-private partnership, incentivized through federal tax credits, working with private developers, nonprofit developers, bringing in banks and contractors to really get the work done.
Yeah.
It only happens in that sphere.
Yeah, I think of a lot of the community development finance institutions, and I know you used to work at one at what was NCall is now Neighborgood, Sinair, True Access Capital. I'm on the board of something called Grow America, which is a national CDFI, and helping to arrange funding and bring some of these pieces together as well.
Yeah, the CDFI network is growing in the state of Delaware, and they're certainly a valuable partner that can help provide, especially to nonprofits, financing that they might not get on the conventional private market.
Yeah.
But those CDFIs working with the private banks can then steer those investments back into the community.
Yeah. when you get people in the room, do you find generally they are willing to talk and work towards solutions?
I believe so, yeah. We did an affordable housing listening tour during my first term in 2023, and we had about 70 people in the Cinema Arts Theater, which is here in Rehoboth, and to talk about affordable housing here. Mm-hmm. And so I think by having this dialogue, you're starting to see more folks opening up to the need for affordable housing. What's that look like? Why is it needed? Even though I have my own house, like, why is it needed for the community? And knowing that we need it for healthcare, for our wonderful restaurant community and the service staff that are part of this hospitality industry. By having the conversations, you start breaking down those barriers and start having advocates in the room who may have not been an advocate before because they were just concerned about growth and development, period. Yeah. And so I'm fortunate, I think, in the position that I'm in to be able to continue to foster those conversations, no matter the topic.
If we don't do a better job, and right now I'm focused on this area, the beach communities, if we don't do more about moderate priced housing, what happens?
Well, we're seeing it already. There are restaurants who aren't open every day that they used to be open because they don't have the wait staff. We have longer lines or longer wait times for healthcare because it's not necessarily just the doctor that needs the house, but the doctor needs 5 or 6 other folks that also need to work in that doctor's office who don't make doctor salaries. And so it's a community-driven need, not just for the person. And I got involved through Appalachia and all my work because I loved helping that person who got that affordable housing opportunity. But as I've matured and grown older, I now realize that it's not just the benefit for that person who moves in. Yes, tremendous benefit, but it's also a benefit for all of us in our community. And I have a great example of it.
Please.
Okay. I tell people about my great day. As you know, I worked for a nonprofit that helped get people into homeownership opportunities. And they had a sale on mulch at the local hardware store. I went, I purchased a lot. Person who was at the register built in our self-help housing program. Because I lifted so much mulch, I injured my back a little bit, wanted to go to the chiropractor just to get a little bit of an adjustment. The person working at the chiropractor's office that does the stim, like with the ice and that stuff, built in our self-help housing program. It gets better. I even went I had to go to the hospital because our self-help construction manager was actually at the local hospital here at BB. And the person at security who checked me in built in our self-help housing program. Went to visit my employee, and they have dual rooms. The person who's cleaning the other side built in our self-help housing program.
No kidding.
At the end of the day, since my wife said, "Can you pick up some milk at the grocery store?" I said, "Absolutely." I went to the grocery store, and the assistant manager built in our self-help housing program. So it's very much like Mr. Rogers, right?
Yeah.
These are the people in our neighborhood.
I love that.
It comes as simple as that.
Yeah. So it's both retail and wholesale at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Doing it over and over and over again, building programs that serve one person at a time, which builds the community.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Appalachia Service. Can you go back to that a second? So what drove you to that, which ultimately drove you to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so during high school, our church youth group would go for a week out of the summer, and I would go and I would work in Appalachia and put a roof on, insulation, you name it, we would do it. And I just thoroughly enjoyed that experience. And so when I got into college, I said, you know what? I enjoyed that 1 week so much. Let me see if I can apply and do that experience for the whole entire summer.
Yeah.
And because I had a lot of friends who were coming down here to work in the hospitality industry, I decided to go to Appalachia. And that experience was life-changing. It wasn't just like a week that I had during the summer. The amount of responsibility that we had as 4 college-age summer staff members operating a summer center was a tremendous amount of responsibility, all-inspiring. just loved it so much that, I decided to kind of shift what I wanted to do, and realized that serving others in this capacity was something I felt called to do strongly, and changed the course of my career.
I know that program well. I never did it, but from our church, we're growing up, a lot of people, including my wife, did it.
Yeah,
so that was formative for, I think, everybody who went through that.
Amazing experience.
And so that speaks to another thing that wasn't particularly in this brief, but it speaks to the holistic nature of it, which is you went and volunteered.
Yeah.
And in America, the number of people who are volunteering at all is dropping a lot. And we've gone from about 70% of people both donating financially and volunteering to about 50% of people. Very troubling, because to me, this whole idea of volunteering resources, time to others, to be looking outside of ourselves, is essential to what building a community is. And in you doing it, it led you to a career, which is a career built on service and building a community. And in your discussion, we talk about a great place to live, to work, to play, and to get medical care. And, you've got a great place to live. You got people who are getting housing, to work. They've all got these jobs that are supporting the community, to play for the restaurants and getting your mulch and whatever else it is. And then healthcare and the whole range. It's all connected. And, it connects our volunteering, connects our lives, daily lives, our family lives, our healthy lives, and builds the community. And these are the things about what circle it back. We need good housing because it helps build the entirety of the community for everybody.
It does.
And what you're saying to me is, if you don't have the housing for a lot of people, you don't have a community.
You don't have a community. You don't have a workforce. There's just everything will start to crumble.
Well said. I'm Stuart Comstock-Gay here with Senator Russ Huxtable, talking about why housing matters and why, if we don't have good housing policies and good housing, our community crumbles too. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
How to Not Kill Your Community is a podcast written and produced by the Delaware Community Foundation. Thank you to our producers at 1440 Film Company in Wilmington. The Delaware Community Foundation, DCF, stands at the intersection of generosity and community transformation. As experts in community need, we guide individuals and organizations to opportunities that impact causes they care about the most. We manage charitable funds, distribute scholarships, advise donors, and grant to nonprofits, providing leadership to cultivate the future of philanthropy in Delaware. Visit us at delcf.org for more information.